Well, I was visiting Xubing in Beijing. I was working on another project with him, and he invited me to go to the factory to see the birds. I just thought they were fantastic, and they looked very different there than they looked here because they were not. You didn't get the sense that they were flying. And we had a long conversation about how they could come to New York and where they should go in New York. And I said with great enthusiasm, oh, they'll be wonderful in New York. I'll go back to New York and I'll find a place for them in New York.
So when it was being built, when it was being designed, when it was being constructed, we weren't thinking about international shipping. So there was so much that really came into play because they weren't designed to be moved around and shown. They weren't thought of as small components that could go anywhere.
I considered a couple of other places. I went and visited some armories, and I thought about their being outdoors for a while. I thought I thought they might be interesting around downtown. I thought they might be interesting around the World Trade Center because I thought of them as being birds of resurrection, which is very different than they are in Chinese culture. And that didn't seem possible because they can't go outside. And then I was having a conversation with a friend and thought about the cathedral. And I knew how big it was. You know, it's the largest Gothic cathedral in the world.
So it's been a challenge, and it's been an experience where there have been, I wouldn't call them miracles, that's going a little bit far, but there have been these really pleasant surprises where it just kind of works and it just kind of fits. And we got it in there, we got it up, and it's amazing. Again, it's like that sense of sort of quiet collusion where everything kind of comes together, where it makes sense. So you get in there, and indeed the space is big, but the birds hold their own. Indeed the space is very decorated with beautiful stone carving and stained glass, but the bird complements it. There's almost like a conversation.
I think one of the things that's so interesting about them is that it's a public space. It's a cathedral, but I think that had they been in a museum, let's say, we would see them completely differently and the public would see them completely differently. Here they are art if you want them to be art. They are symbols as well if you want them to be symbols. They could even be seen as part of the decoration of the cathedral. You walk in and you do look and see them and think, oh my God, maybe they've always been here. That they accrue meaning wherever they are. I don't think Xubing approaches things with a set idea. In other words, he was invited to do something for the World Financial Center, and he took into consideration all of the parameters, and he saw, as you know, the workers and their conditions, and he saw all of the debris from the old city, and so he decided to make something out of that.
The phoenix has this great, I want to call it a chameleon. A chameleon is something that takes different forms in order to protect itself. But the phoenix has really taken on various representations visually in Chinese history, has been used to mean different things. So a chengyu, a phrase that many of us are familiar with, 百鸟朝凤, 100 birds paying homage to the phoenix, comes to mean a ruler who is fair in his treatment of the people. The phoenix comes to represent, in the eyes of many of the common people, the expression of unrealized hopes and dreams. So we had this real rich palette to draw on and lots of historical and social connections to play with, to create something that looks like a dinosaur, that is fierce but is also lithe, something that is delicate, something that's so heavy, something that's 12 tons of construction material and concrete and is 100 feet long for each bird, can still look like light, like a constellation.
But then in the course of doing that, that's one element of the meaning. They become something else. They become these beautiful creatures, and they connect to Chinese myth of a creature of peace and power, and they connect to Western myth, which was probably not his intention, of a bird of renewal and resurrection that burns up and represents even literally the resurrection. I think what moves me about the birds, and it still does, is they're so animate. I have pictures I took in Beijing, and they look like they're about to start dancing around the floor or flying. They look real, even though they're fantastically imaginary and they're mythical. And I was struck by how colorful they were. I was struck by all their different parts and pieces. I didn't realize quite how elaborate they were till I saw them here up close a lot of times.
What Xubing says is, he says, materials themselves are not important. I don't say I'm going to make something out of fabric and make a fabric work. I don't say I'm going to make something out of ceramics and make a pot. What he says is, I know what I want to say, and once I know what I want to say, once I've encountered a problem, encountered an issue, and I know what I want to say, then I find the material, the only material that can say what I want to say. Materials that fundamentally are imitations of nature. So there's that process of choosing a form where the relationship between the materials made sense. There was a logic. There's a reason that a backhoe is used as a claw, like we were just saying. There's a reason that the shovels are used on the feathers. There's a reason that its head is a hydraulic hammer, because a beak is, in essence, a hydraulic hammer. It's a hammer for, getting that acorn or, getting those fish out of the sand. So we saw this connection between the natural, between the man-made, between wealth, between labor, between poverty, between hardship, between luxury, between China when he left in 1990 and China in 2008 when he returned. So he saw all this stuff. He saw China in this process of focusing on its contemporary social issues. And he thought, well, what represents this moment? What represents this environment? What represents visually? He talks about the saying, 家己随鸡，家狗随狗, which means that when you marry a chicken, you're going to follow that chicken. When you marry a dog, you're going to follow that dog. Which is to say, love the house, love the bird, whatever. Basically what he's saying is that wherever the phoenix goes, it becomes relevant.
I think the other really interesting thing, of course, is that they looked, and I know they look completely different wherever they are. Here in the cathedral, they look like they're actually almost meant to be there, and they're flying through the cathedral, and they have a mission, and they're going through the window, and they're kind of have an elegant, the elegance of birds in flight in a way, and that you didn't. That's very specific here, and also I guess since it's a cathedral and it's a sacred space, you get the feeling that they have some mission here. They're peaceful here.
I think part of it is expectations. So when you go into a museum space, you're expecting to see a work of art put in a specific context. You're expecting a certain amount of interpretive information. You go in there ready for art. Whereas in a public space, you're dealing with people that are not coming in to see art, that maybe don't want to see art, that maybe will be angry if they see art, or people that expect the space to be used for something else, or have a specific use in mind for themselves for the space, or who aren't expecting that in a really positive way.
What's so interesting about contemporary Chinese art, to me, is it's a great adventure for me because it's something I don't know about. And the best art for me, Chinese art, just looking at it, is the art that is highly original and is not aping Western art. That is not copying Western art. That where it comes from is of course important, and what it's about is, in a cultural sense, is important. But to identify it only in terms of its culture is to keep it in a certain place that is not necessarily accessible to everybody and is not necessarily fair to the art. The art should be speaking to everyone. And I think we have a tendency to want to pigeonhole things because it's easier for us and not see it in a larger context. Where what's interesting about Xubing is that he's very much honors his own culture, but he's operating on a world stage in a way, as far as his ideas go. And I think that's hard for artists. I think it's very hard for artists to do.
There are some places that really want to show the Phoenix. It's a question, I think, of whether or not it's just practical or possible. Part of it also comes down to the owner and his desire to have it back. I know he misses his birds. I would too. But my hope, and I am maybe a little naive in my dreaming, but seeing how people respond to it here, how they responded to the birds in North Adams at Massamoka, I really want to bring it to as many people as possible. I mean, the biggest challenge is finding the right space. But once you find the right space, it's almost hard to quiet down that urge to bring it to people. Because once it's there, you can't really deny how exciting it is and how powerful it is.